in terms of the override, it has three primary components. The first component is the money needed to avoid all the cuts that were talked about in the first go-round here. All of those cuts amount to about $227,000. So the override's first chore is to restore those cuts so that all those bad things and difficulties that would be presented to the departments would be hopefully avoided, at least to the extent of the $227,000. The second third has to do with adding monies to the operating budgets of the various departments so that they can begin to do additional things that the guideline budget would not allow. When we put the guideline budget together back in the fall, it was structured that the budgets couldn't have more than 2.5% in it as an increase to labor, a 0% increase to expenses, with the exception of energy, which was allowed to go up by 7%. You can imagine how difficult it is to budget under those constraints. So these monies in the second third are for additional activities. And the third component is in the area of the capital plan. In the override, there are a few items that are beyond what were able to be covered in the basic budget. So the three altogether add up to $786,298. Now, in addition to the four major departments whose budgets, one way or another, their direct budgets, their budgets plus indirect expenses, even when you bring in the amount of debt that is incurred in order to perform things like owning a building for the schools or for the police station, all the capital equipment that the DPW employs by way of trucks and equipment, they add up to over 85% of the total budget of the town. And yet there are probably another 40 departments of one size or another. Some of them are made up by one part-time person, but nonetheless, they add up to the other 15%. And they have needs as well. And we were able to determine, for instance, in the planning board's case, that a $3,000 increment to their budget would allow them to retain the total number of hours that they currently employ for a planner and not have to cut back those hours. The planner, as someone said, has every right. They're an independent contractor. They increase their rate from $45 to $50 an hour, and we want 600 hours. The town does, the planner does, but that wouldn't work in the budget, so this $3,000 is for them. The forest fire department, we found out, has virtually useless radio equipment. When the town moved over to new equipment in the dispatcher and other areas, the equipment that are in the forest fire trucks became incompatible with the dispatcher. They cannot communicate back to the dispatcher. And that, plus the fact that they need handheld devices and pagers, when we went out and surveyed all the departments, we determined that that was a critical need, and that is in the override. It wasn't in the original capital allocation, but that's $4,000. The personnel board needs a study done, and that qualifies as a capital item. The MIS department, even though it's not what Jeff, the manager of that department, would like in total, it is a new domain server, and that will go a long ways to helping at the very hub, the heart, if you will, communication network, provide a piece of hardware and some commensurate software that will help the library, help the police department, help the schools as we begin to integrate. Because one of the things that the Finance Committee is very hep on is that we need to do a better job of leveraging technology in the years ahead. And you can't do that if you don't have the right capital and people investment. This is a modest beginning, but it is, in our opinion, a good one. Now, the last two items are ones that are perhaps a little soft, as people might look at them, but they are extremely important to the operation of the town. First of all, we have what's called a reserve fund that the Finance Committee by statute is required and authorized to manage. And over the past couple of years, that's gone from $225,000 a year down to $100,000. And this $50,000 will bring it back up to $150,000. The stabilization funds, one is the traditional one that has been around, I don't know, 50 years, a long time anyway, is called a rainy day fund. Its purpose, as you might infer from the name, although it's probably not technically the right interpretation, but it stabilizes the tax rate. It's a savings account for rainy days. So instead of having huge ups and downs, and we've done that. We've taken money out of that fund and we've put money back, but it's still significantly below the levels that it should be. It's about $750,000, and it should be almost twice that, 5% of our operating budget. The other stabilization fund is brand new, a couple of years old, has $100,000, and it's there to be like what I would call a sinking fund. It's money that we're putting aside so that we can easily pay sick leave and vacation buyback privileges that retiring and departing employees have a contractual right to gain. So the override is $786,000. Number one, it forestalls the very disruptive cuts that departments would have to take. It provides some additional money for many departments across the board to better achieve their goals of providing services. And in a couple of cases, $100,000 worth, we're talking about additional capital so that they'll be able to do that job. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Well, we're just about halfway through, and now we get to individual questions for the different departments. And Director Tomaz, I've been calling you John and everybody else with a title here, but the first question for you is, how does the '08 budget compare with the 1999 budget, which was 10 years ago?
Well, probably a big difference between the 1999 budget, and that's actually kind of significant for me because that's when I started in Rockport. I actually closed in on 10 years here, which is kind of hard to believe. But I suppose in 1999 it was very easy to say yes to a lot of requests because I had a good budget since then. Since that time, I've now become a no person. And to kind of highlight why I've become a no person is that if you look at the budgets that were for the highway and the garage and buildings and cemeteries, parks and such like that, I'm about $55,000 less in my operating budget than I was 10 years ago. And $55,000 is significant for me as far as just, again, what I can and cannot do. So again, for me, as much as I would like to do things for folks, and I think it's important to maintain the infrastructure of Rockport, it's getting very hard to do. Another quick example is that a couple of months ago, the kids graffitied the wall down on Long Beach. Some thought it was work of art, others thought it was just vandalism, which I thought it was too.
Me too.
Quite frankly, 3 months ago, I had the money to say, okay, remove it. The money was $1,200. If it were to happen now, you'd be looking at the graffiti till probably July. So again, a lot of folks say $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. Well, it adds up very quickly. I have to make choices. Unless there's a health, a safety risk involved, I'm probably not going to do it right now. I'm going to have to delay it or not do it at all. So those are probably, to me, the biggest changes from 1999 budget to where I'm at right now.
Thank you. Hope, in the library, why is municipal funding essential?
We have to meet the certification requirements. There's something that's called the municipal appropriations requirement. That means that it's the portion of the library budget that must come to the library from the town in order to meet certification requirements. It actually costs, or 25% of the cost of running the library today is not funded from the town budget. I cannot use a donation and grant money to meet the municipal appropriations requirement for the state. Many people have come up to me as they've heard that we're $32 short for certification and say, Hope, I'll write you a check, that'll help the library. And I appreciate very much the support, as the trustees do, and the generosity, but it doesn't count. That money must come from the municipal budget in order to meet the state requirements.
In my simplified version of that, that's to show that the town appreciates the library they have, I would imagine.
Right, and not only appreciates it, but steps up and provides a funding base for library services within the community.
Thank you very much.